guys, and welcome to another episode of Metal Mastermind. Your co-founder, co-host Jason Stallworth, and co-founder, co-host the great
Ken Candelas, man.
What's up, dude?
I'm good, man. We are here. We are gathered here today to give our thanks.
Now, real quick before we get started, I know the audience can't see this, but I'm looking at your background. By the way, guys, we record this virtually. I'm in the Tampa, Florida area, Sefner to be exact. Ken, you're in Queens, New York. You're
right.
in New York City there. So, you can see my guitar singing on the wall. And you've got such a cool background, dude. This big box over there. What is that? Are those preamps? Like, what is that, man?
Yeah,
those are the old school.
Preamps, valve tubes.
Oh, man. And we talked about that, I think, on an episode or two ago.
Yep.
We're talking about, virtual stuff, plugins and software versus hardware, all that stuff. Make sure you check that podcast out because that was really interesting. But guys, we have a really cool topic today. I always say that. I mean, they're all cool topics. They're here to hopefully drive us forward in our music, our careers, and really in daily life. But Ken and I were talking earlier about measuring your life's results and figuring out what's working in your life and in your music, right? In writing and practicing, what's working versus the things that aren't working, the things that you may be doing that aren't serving you, doubling down on the things that are working and maybe ditching the stuff that's not working so well. So Ken, we had a great discussion earlier that probably could have been this podcast. So we're going to revisit that, right?
Well, it's kind of one of those things where it's a universal concept, I think. It relates to so many things. And, here particularly with music, I think we get so caught up with the immediate gratification of certain things with sound or, musical ideas, or I got this idea, let's do this. And that in moderation is good, but too much of that is just chaos. And sometimes we don't rein ourselves in enough to be able to formulate an idea and see it through to the end. You know what I mean?
That makes sense, dude.
This is something I feel like is very, very universal in more things than just music.
It's funny in my corporate job, you guys know I dropped the whole corporate life about a little over 3 years ago to be a full-time guitar player. I'm gonna quit my responsible corporate job and play guitar. But hey, it's working out so far, and thanks to Ken here. We've talked about that in other podcasts, but one of the things that I experienced in corporate America and at most jobs, and most of you probably experience this. You can raise your hand if you've experienced this, but how many times have you had your boss or what's coming down the pipe, right, that you're supposed to do that just seems like busy work? It's like you can like dream up. So, Ken's raising his hand. I've been there. Everybody's raising their hand, you can dream up so much busy work to make you feel like you're busy and you're doing something. But how many times have you done that job, all this busy work? And at the end of the day, you're like, what did I actually do? I would walk away so many times like, what did I actually accomplish today? And I'm not picking on corporate America. I actually, I'm thankful for the time I got to meet people from all over the world. I don't want to say the corporation's name. Some of you know, but I worked for a very large company, and I was high middle. I'm not going to pretend I was somebody I wasn't, but I had a prestigious title, somewhat. But I got to meet people from India. I had a team in different countries, and just cool. So I'm very thankful for that. If anybody listening did work with me, I'm very thankful that I got to work there. It was a great experience. But in any case, the busy work, yeah, I think we can create that in our own lives. It's like, okay, well, I need to do this. How many times have you, here's another raise your hand point. How many times have you sat there and you're like, well, I need to work on this, but I also want to do that. Oh, I need to do that over here. And I'm late on this over here. And you sit there for 30 minutes. Like, what do I do? We're all raising our hands again. Right. And I think this is crazy. You have to nail down like what I think Ken and tell me where your perspective is on this, but you have to nail down what's the most effective thing, what's the most important thing that you really need to get done like right now.
I tell my students it's really important to value your time. There is so much that demands of us that I also tell students you have to be willing to say no to.
Mm.
You have to understand that, because this is, let me just put it into this perspective. A lot of my students are aspiring audio engineers and musicians. So a lot of them, they're going into the internship field, and they're trying to get some experience and all this kind of stuff. And I just tell them, because they always ask me, how do I know when it's like, when I'm like ready to be with the big leagues? And it's like, well, it may not feel very obvious to you, because when you're working in this industry and you're freelancing, you're trying to get the next gig, it's always about when's the next gig, because there's no guarantee that you'll have a gig. So you're always on the edge of your seat, kind of like, am I going to eat this month? Or if I got so much down the line, it's like, oh my God, it's too much work, because when it rains, it pours. And you have to be able to also have the resistance to spending all that money at one go. Restraint is important in the freelance field. So I tell them, I said, when you're in this industry in the beginning, you're going to say yes to everything, because you want the experience. You want to get in there. You want to be in front of, your peers, showing that you're doing professional work. You want to, get better clients, all this stuff. And so as you're doing that, you may not realize that you're constantly building your reputation with all the people that you've met, and all the interactions that you've created, and all the work that you've done. And you may still feel like you're some sort of a phony even after doing all of that, because it never does happen in a moment to you where it's like, oh yeah, I'm a professional. It's like, it happens over time. It's a slow process that doesn't blurt out its name to you. It's something you have to be confident in. That's the thing about this industry, and the thing about being a musician in general. It's never like, oh yeah, it's not going to be as easy as, okay, yeah, I'm an amateur right now, so I'm playing, and then tomorrow I gotta tour with Megadeth. I'm a pro now. It's like, that's not going to happen. You're going to slowly probably work your way up to a point in this music industry to get to that point, even if you're lucky to play with someone as big as Megadeth. So it's like, you got to really take it as it comes. You have to be open to the idea that you actually do know what you're doing and respect yourself for that, and knowing your worth, and knowing and valuing your time and where you allocate that time. Because when you get to a certain point in this, you have to say, okay, out of all the gigs that I'm being offered, or all the work that I'm trying to get, which one do I really want to further my goals, right? Whether that's you choosing to be able to work at a premier studio, because that's going to give you access to high quality equipment so that you can record your next record, which is great, by the way. Having an internship at a studio is a fantastic way to get an in at a studio. Or, you're trying to really nail down your skill set. So you're working all these gigs, you're playing all these gigs. And Jason, like, I know you play a lot of acoustic gigs. So it's like, are all of those, maybe you're rehearsing with a band, are all these efforts that you're doing with these artists, is that, helping you grow? Are you in a room where you can learn? Or are you the best person in the room? Because if you are, you need to start looking elsewhere.
It's a good point. Well, I mean, my acoustic gigs, I'm a solo act. It's just myself up there. But to that point though, Ken, talking about like what's serving you, what's working for you versus what's not. The acoustic shows I do, 2 to 3 a week. I think I've only got 2 gigs this week. I'm hosting open mic tomorrow night in Tampa at Bootleggers Brewing. Of course, the podcast will have been out, but I'm starting to host open mic once a month at this brewery. And that's something that doesn't render a huge financial reward. It's very minute, but it's at the same time, I enjoy it. You know what I mean? I almost enjoy that sometimes, just getting to go there and letting other people. I'll perform a little bit too, right? It's a little bit different from the live acoustic solo gigs, which again I do 2 or 3 of those a week. But going back to managing time, that has taken time away from things like my own album. Ken, you and I, we put a lot of time and effort into Metal Mastermind, and this is a full blown. It's not incorporated. We are an LLC, right? We're a
Yep.
limited liability corporation, but we're not like an S corp or C corp. But we are running a legit business, and there's a lot to what we do. We were just talking about this earlier, and that's what sparked this conversation. Ken and I were going over some things like let's talk about and analyze the things that are working for Metal Mastermind, the things that we're doing that are working, and let's maybe go over some things that we are doing, but those aren't rendering results. So I've got to look at my acoustic live schedule. Yeah, I'm getting paid for that. It's great. I started doing it to make some extra money again, because I'm a independent musician now. This is all I do. My albums, YouTube, Metal Mastermind, my courses and such. But it was taken away. It's been taken away time from other things that I want to do.
Right.
Of course, there's the benefit of being on stage too. It's a lot easier to get solo gigs than it is to gig with a band. You know what I mean? And oftentimes when you're playing with a band, you're having to split the money all these different ways. Whereas a solo performer, that's why I encourage people, hey man, if you're at a point where you're singing and playing, start doing solo gigs. It's a pretty decent income, a side income that you'll make from it for minimal effort. I don't want to say minimal effort. That's not entirely accurate. There's driving, set up, tear down. You're performing solo, everything's on you. You mess up with the band, you can point at the drummer, right? But you mess up in the solo act, well, hey, everybody's going to hear it. So, but it is fun. All that said, guys, I'm getting off track here. Is that I told my wife that I want to reduce the amount of solo gigs I take next year in 2024 because I want to focus more on my own music, right? And doing things that are going to benefit me in other ways. So yeah, you have to make those decisions, and what's working for you and where do you want to be, right? And what's not working for you. The solo gigs are working for me, but at the same time, it's taken away time from the other things I really want to pursue.
You've talked to me about this concept of bandwidth. I think it's a very, very, very true thing. I think a lot of people don't really think about that. Because everybody is always mentioning, oh, more content. I got to do this. I got to make time for this. But, do you have the bandwidth to take on all of that? It's a lot of current in electrical terms.
I got that from the corporate world. I was on a conference call, and I don't remember the young lady's name. Super nice girl. I was on a conference call. This is years ago, and she was a busy girl. Someone was asking her to do something extra, and she's like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do that." And she's like, "Why not?" And she just said, "It's a bandwidth thing." And I took that. I love it. I'm like, it's a bandwidth thing. And guys, it is everything. Like you said, Ken, we've all got the same amount of time. We can probably be doing a lot more. But if you audit your time, like hour by hour, and figure out the things that you're doing that are truly working for you versus the things that are just wasting time, use your time wisely, but also don't overload yourself with a bunch of busy work and just stuff that, where you're just trying to juggle different things and nothing is getting 100%. This is a problem, and you guys can all raise your hand again on this one. How many of you work a job where they want you to do like 10 different things and you just kind of throw your hands up like, well, which one do you want me to do? Like, which one's the most important? Well, all 10 things are important, right? And these are some of the frustrations you have at certain jobs. It's like, okay, well, you're trying to do more with less, but you're putting all this stuff on people, and it's not possible to be great. Very few people in the world can truly multitask. I've never met one that can do it efficiently. It just, multitasking, I believe, is a myth. Doesn't mean you can't do different things, but you have to allocate dedicated focus to certain things at certain times.
Right.
Absolutely. So yeah, bandwidth. It's important, man. It is a bandwidth thing. And those of you at work, if your boss asks you to do multiple stuff, say, hey man, I can't do this. It's a bandwidth thing.
Yeah. And to each their own, some people have the capacity to do a lot. And,
Yeah.
I look at those people as like the great rivers of, continents. They have like these
Yeah.
giant wide channels that can absorb so much information and do so much productivity. That's an
Yeah.
amazing individual. Like in some capacity, we try to emulate those, and we are still, working out our own kinks. There are some people who don't have that kind of bandwidth. Their bandwidth is maybe like a little creek, in comparison. So, and that's okay. I think it's knowing where you fit in all of this. Where do you extract your value from? And where do you contribute value back, right? Because it's a cycle. You give and it's returned to you, it's reciprocated. So depending on how much you're able to work on right now, and it's not something that's static, right? It's something that is dynamic, grows. It's kind of like, think of going back to the river analogy. Rivers, they rise, they fall, right? They change their amount of capacity depending on what point they're at in their life or their season or day and night or whatever, right? It's going to change. And so we have to remember that we're very much like water. We're very much like rivers. Now I sound like a monk, but we're
You
going
sound like Bruce Lee, dude. Yeah.
we have we have this a capacity of within ourselves, within our brains, within the electrical currents that we execute within our neurons to be able to do certain things. And how long can we sustain those before we burn out? That's the endurance part of it. And we have to find that balance of how we can continuously better ourselves, but at the same time we have to prioritize and be very, very realistic on saying, hey, what can we actually do that's moving the needle forward, as we so like to say often on this show, but also not just how do we move the needle forward, but how do we stay healthy and in balance with ourselves and in tune with ourselves and not jeopardize ourselves for the sake of what we're trying to accomplish here. You can't, it's like you can't take care of anybody else if you can't take care of yourself, sort of thing.
It's true. It's so true. I mean, how many times have you gone to a doctor for something and they're telling you you need to stop doing this or start doing this, and you look over at the doctor and they're out of shape? And I don't want to go down that road, guys, but it's disturbing sometimes, right? You got to take care of yourself before you can help someone else. You got to make sure you're taken care of. And the other thing that I think this is why, talking about allocating time and bandwidth, this is why so many of us never do that thing that we really want to do with our life. We never really get that thing, right? Because we're just too busy, and we say, if we only had like 3 months off, I could just get that album out there. I could put this single out there. I could start a band or whatever. And the truth is you really have to do an audit of your life. I go back to this, I've been auditing my own time a little bit more carefully lately, because I'm like, it seems like I don't have enough time. I'm like, what did I do yesterday? I sat in my studio and I jammed a lot, man. I played the crap out of my guitar yesterday. So that's not really wasted time, but I'm supposed to be writing lyrics, finishing up the lyrics for my album. Ken, you and I both are hopefully getting our albums out there sooner than later. We've both been working hard on them. But it's like certain things need to be done right now, whereas other things can wait. Like you talked about the water of the oceans, there are seasons where they rise and fall, and water's allocated to certain places probably as it's needed during that time. So what season are you in life right now? Are you in a season to where, you know what, I'm going to write an album, so let me dedicate 30 minutes a day, get rid of something else that I'm doing that's not serving me, right? And replace that with writing for that album, or getting the beginning phases started, the process and such. So I think you really just have to figure out what's most important to you and realize you can't do everything all the time.
Yeah, and that's why when it comes to being an indie musician, you and I very much know that it's a 10-year journey before really anything happens, because you are building your music, your catalog, you're building your brand, you're building your marketing skills, you're building your social media engagement, you're building all this stuff, right? So nowadays it's very, very tough because you have to be that person that has to take the reins, and you have to take control. You have to just do it. And so where you are in your process should not be a way for you to also criticize what you're not doing. I think it's very important that you recognize, like you were saying, what season you're in. So if you're in a process right now, see it till the end, right? Don't just say, okay, I'm songwriting right now, but I need to be marketing at the same time. No, you don't. Maybe you just need to focus on making that song really good. And then, putting marketing more on the back burner. If you want to do like the automated systems and, having an email funnel with, email addresses always coming in, fine, if you can allocate to that. But it's one of those things where you have to really think about, hey, look, I'm trying to do something here. What's the end goal? What do I really need to make this happen? And you got to kind of reverse engineer what that is going to look like. And what are all the steps that you need to do? Honestly, this is something I recently did with my own project where I created an artist analysis presentation where I was like, as if I was going to present it to an investor. And I actually got so much out of that, just doing that exercise. It brought a lot of clarity to what I think I needed to do with my project. So I honestly really highly recommend like essentially going through a business plan for your music, because if you do that, it puts it out like a map on the table, and it says, here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm bad at, because you got to do strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, SWOT analysis.
Yep.
Right? So these types of things, they're supposed to reveal all the goods, the bads, the uglies of your business. And it's to be honest with yourself. Where do you need help? Where do you need to prioritize more time? If you haven't done this, if you haven't organized your project in a way like this, I highly recommend you do it. It could really, really change how you perceive your music and how you approach tackling your music. Highly recommend it.
It could also show you where you might want to consider outsourcing certain things that you do. Ken, something you and I talked about before we started the podcast. Ken and I, we always have our business meeting. Hey, again, what's working, what's not, what do we need to change, what do we need to pursue more of and maybe ditch. And we got thinking, like, you and I, we run Metal Mastermind, but we also have our own music. I play live gigs. You also teach at the university there. So we have a lot going on. It's like we got to thinking, are just us two really enough to run it? And we are talking about possibly bringing someone on, hiring someone to handle some of the marketing, like the Facebook advertising, YouTube advertising, that sort of thing. So we're contemplating that, because it's like, where are our weaknesses at? And that's one of them. So you have to, like you said, Ken, you have to recognize and be honest with yourself about your weak points. I know I'm probably not the best person to mix my album. I can mix really good to a certain point, but to get to that next pro level, I need a little bit of help. Looking back at my first 4 albums, yeah, they're great. I mean, they're good. I'm proud of what I did, right? I wouldn't do anything differently if I had to go back in time. But this next album, I want it to be that much better, and I don't want to be my own weakest link. So who do I go to? Well, I'm going to go to our mixing engineer and producer, Nick Z, who he's got a course out there on Metal If you go to metalmastermind.com, by the way, you'll see all of our courses, but he's got Metal Producer Overlord. So I'm going to go through the course, but I'm thinking of actually hiring Nick to do the mixing, definitely the mastering. So I'm going to be working with him. You guys can stay tuned. We'll be sharing some of that content out there on the Jason Stallworth channel and Metal Mastermind as well. But again, it's a weak point. So if I feel like I don't have the skills to do that, and honestly, guys, I don't really want to get that deep into that, especially mastering. I never will I have the desire to master music. It's just not my thing. That's for someone who is an expert in that and who enjoys that sort of work. I like writing, I like creating, I love performing, but when it comes to the finite details, that's kind of where my hangup is. So I need to realize that about myself and you have to ask yourself the question, is that something that you want to train yourself to get good on? Because if you start going down that path, that will take away time from the other things. Me and my advice to most people is to take what you're good at and double down on what you're great at, right? Get even better at those, right? And then you can hand the other stuff off to someone else.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Because we want to feel like we can take control of everything. But if you do that, and I'm just speaking from experience, it's just going to take a long time. It really is. It will take a long time. And going back to Nick, I mean, you know me as an audio engineer and an audio instructor, and all these things that I preach to my students, I also live by them as well. Now, as an audio engineer and instructor, yeah, I'm more interested in actually mixing my own record. But here's something that, you could take away even from someone like me, which is I needed outside perspective on my mix. I was literally so swallowed up in what I was doing. It actually really helped to hear how somebody else would mix it for me to know what I wanted out of mix. So use your friends as a tool, as a resource, or hire somebody to participate in that for you, even if it meant doing a portion of the mix, because my music is very complex. It's symphonic, it's cinematic, it's got all this stuff. And I'm trying to do this format of music that I don't think is very common, if anywhere I can find it. And
it's not at all, dude.
it's very narrative and all this stuff. So I have a very specific vision for it. And having someone like Nick, because he's part mixing engineer on my album, he went in and I said, okay, Nick, you're really good with mixing like the core elements of metal. So can I get your take? Can I get your perspective on mixing the core band in Homeric? And then I'm just going to mix around some of that and, tweak a little bit here and there. But it's more like I want to mix the orchestral and the narrative cinematic elements around that, because I know exactly how I want to execute that side of things. He was like, sure, no problem. So, and then we had this sort of collaborative effort where we both kind of went back and forth on making this mix come to its position where it is right now, which I'm really proud of. And it wouldn't have happened if I didn't have Nick to do that. So I think it's very important that because we can get very much inside our own heads with certain things, and to take a step back, that's why we always say, hire somebody else to do your mastering if you're mixing, because you don't want to master your own stuff. You're too biased. You don't have that that outsider's perspective to say, objectively, what does this need? And you're missing that, and you're doing yourself a disservice by not having that. So if it matters to you, get outside perspective. It's super important.
That's a great point. Yeah. Again, you don't want to be your own weakest link. And, going back to I know a lot of you listening, probably most of you listening right now are not full-time musicians. I'd be interested to know how many of you are, or how many of you own your own business. Cause it's kind of the same thing, you're doing multiple things, within that business. And if you're a musician, like myself, you've got multiple sources, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost required these days. But let's say you're working a full-time job, 40 hours a week, which a lot of you full-timers, especially if you're in the corporate environment where you're not working 40 hours, you're doing 50, 60 plus, like I used to do, right? But I'd love to know how you manage your time. And I know that can be difficult because, you want to play guitar, you want to write music and that sort of thing. This is where it comes down to, you've got your job, you've got your career, maybe you have a family too. So those are obvious priorities in your life. So you really have to look at everything else extra. And it's almost like you have to figure out, what's the one thing outside of family and job that I really want to do with my life. Now, if you play music as a hobby, probably not such a big deal. You just practice when you can, not a big deal. But if you've got that strong desire to really do something with your music and go further with it, or become a mixing engineer or become a music producer, then I believe you really have to audit your time carefully outside of work and family, and really nail down the things that you're doing that are not serving you, that's going to push you forward in the area of music, and really ditch most of those things, or greatly reduce the amount of time you spend on them. Like if you're a gamer, for example, I don't know if you're how many of you are gamers, but I've met a lot of guitar players. They love video games. Well, if you have the job and the family and that's priority, or even just the job, sometimes you work a lot of hours, but you really want to pursue your music. Well, that might mean you had to ditch gaming or greatly reduce and replace gaming with, I don't know, golf or whatever else you do. I'm not saying you can't live a life of, like just work all the time, right? And you can't do things you really want to do. But, well, if you really want to do music, and that's the thing, well, it has to become a very obvious priority in your life. So, a good friend of mine told me that you have time what you make time for. And that's always resonated with me when I feel like I don't have time. It's like, well, then I damn better sure make the time to do it. So you have to think of it in terms of like, what do I really want to do with my life?
Yeah, man. I relate so hard to gaming because when I was a kid, that was all I wanted to do. It was actually to
Zelda,
a point
dude,
where,
Zelda.
dude, if you want to hear my story one more time, I will tell it to you. Okay.
We might
Sixth
as well because
grade.
we're all here, man.
Sixth grade, man. I was like, let's make a Zelda game. And it was a fan fiction,
Mhm.
of course. I was just making my own story out of it. And I wrote like freaking a 60-page manuscript in sixth grade on my idea. And it wasn't even complete yet. I was just like fumbling with like some thoughts, and I was like writing a story and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I took that idea, and when I was in middle school, I actually made like a 30-minute playable demo of what my game was supposed to be on a program called RPG Maker XP back when we had Windows XP.
Ooh.
And yeah, from that point, I was like, it would be kind of cool if I had my own music in it, right? And that's where I started to go down the rabbit hole of making my own music and transcribing Zelda music. And I was so immersed with that world. By the time I got to high school, which all this time, by the way, I was a visual artist. I was always drawing. I was always making like creations. And I went to high school, an arts high school that had music and art and performing arts. And that was my major. I was an art major. So I went there thinking, I was like, I'm going to do this because I want to be a video game designer. I want to create concept art. I want to create characters, story landscapes, all this kind of stuff. And in the middle of my high school career, this game called Rock Band came out, and it made me want to play drums, and it changed my life forever, you know? So all this time, you're speaking to a guy whose foundation in everything in his creativity is video games. I don't
Yeah.
play a lot of video games nowadays. I really don't have time for them because, and I absolutely like want to play them too, but I always find another thing that I can do with my time than playing just a video game. The only times I ever play video games are like every now and then with my brother and sister, and we play this online game called Dead by Daylight, which is like a really fun like horror game. It's like a cooperative sort of thing, and it's easy replayability. So I don't really have to like devote a lot of time to it. It's like, okay, let's play a match, type of thing. But there's other games out there like the new Zelda game that came out, which I don't have the system for it. It requires a Nintendo Switch. And the new Zelda game, I see people devoting like hundreds of hours to it. And I'm like, yeah, that game, you could definitely do that. But I just don't have the time to do something like that. And there are so many things that I want to play, and they just require so much time for me to really get into it that it's like, I could totally be doing something else. I could be working on my music. I could be working on my biz. I could be working on something that I really want to push the needle forward on. And when you choose to spend time on something like video games, I find it that I enjoy video games so much more now because I don't play them all the time, that it really feels like I'm rewarding myself with a way to just decompress. And it's like, I'm choosing right now to spend my time with fun and not really think about anything business related. But if you kind of overstimulate your mind with playing games all the time, it I think it kills a lot of drive, because now you're always thinking about, oh, I have to make my video game, achievement here happen by this weekend, because I don't know, this event is like only a limited time event, so I got to make that happen. Whatever that situation may be, I think it serves you to step away from a lot of dopamine inducing events like video games, because then you're overdriving your senses and you're not able to actually create value, because you're numbing yourself. You're numbing yourself to doing something that can be done on any whim, and there's no real life reward for that. You're playing a video game. It's like, okay, you got $1 million. This was actually funny. I talked to my fiance Elizabeth, and I said, wow. I said, I got a pretty decent amount of cash in this game. She goes like, is that real cash? And I said, no. She says like, then I don't care. I was like,
a cool sword.
I said,
right?
you're right. Maybe I should turn this off now.
That's a very good point. And again, guys, it's all about allocating your time. And, we're certainly not preaching against video games. I haven't touched a video game, and I couldn't tell you how long. It's been years. In my junior college days, this is back in like the very early 90s, probably 93, 94, is playing Mortal Kombat all the time. And of course, I had the old school. I'm a bit older, so I had the old school Nintendo. I remember playing on the Atari and this system called Odyssey 2. This is when they had square balls. But yeah, when the new Nintendo came out, the first generation Nintendo, you had to put the cartridge in, blow it. If it didn't work, then you had to put it in again, then pull it out just a little bit, then press it down, and sometimes it'd work. That was just kind of the trick. But ABB, right, left, hold down, whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, it was cool. I had a lot of fun. But of course, I was a kid then, so you got what's seemingly like limitless time as a kid. I was playing guitar all the time, but I played a lot of video games too. As an adult, when you're working and you got those freaking adult responsibilities, it becomes a more of a choice on what do you really want to do. Now, if you're happy with your job and you're happy just playing your instrument, 30 minutes on Saturday or something like that, and hey, play as much video games as you want, if that's the life you want. But if you're wanting to do something more with your life, and we're not saying you should or shouldn't, hey, it's your choice, man. There's no right or wrong answer to any of this. But I know, and Ken, a lot of you listening right now, you do want to do something a little bit more with your music, and again, some of you, maybe it's not so much starting a band, maybe it's not so much even, releasing a record, maybe it's you want to get into the mixing part and the production part. A lot of people have a lot of fun with that, man. You're mixing someone else's record. You have to allocate your time appropriately, and you have to determine what's more important. Is this game, or is this round of golf that I'm playing twice a week, or whatever you do, right? Is that more important than this goal that I have? And I think once you get to a certain level of achievement with that goal, sometimes you can back off of that just a little. You don't want to back off too much, but you can allocate some more free time if you want, unless you're wanting to get to that next level above that, and so forth. But I'm all about having a good time. Ken, you and I, we both love some craft beer, man. Sometimes if I don't have a gig on a Sunday, I might sit in the pool and I'll read. I'm multitasking. I'm reading and having a couple craft beers, and I usually make work out of it, because the stuff I read is oftentimes geared towards marketing and just developing yourself. And then I might decide to go live on YouTube like I did this last Sunday. I'm like, I'm going to finish the evening of craft beers and play some guitar. So I always end up making it work anyway. It's
fantastic.
But you can do so. I like to relax too. Ken, you and I were talking about we work hard, but we also desire that free time to do other things too. So you just got to balance. You got to figure out what's more important and really look at the things that are not serving you. Look at the things that are just straight up time wasters, and you either had to get rid of them altogether or greatly reduce them, and then figure out what is working for you or what you really want to do and what you need to do to get that working for you, and double down on that stuff, man. It's just so much more fulfilling.
Yeah. The Great Sacrifice.
Yeah. It could be a metal album, dude. The Great Sacrifice. So.
Great Sacrifice. Yeah, it's true, man. And in words of wisdom, man, because that really, it lends itself to anything in life, not just music, So
It goes across the board, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, and we've talked about this too many times. The people around you, sometimes they're not serving you either. So you gotta prioritize your time and space, and the more efficient you are with that, you can achieve certain things in life. But yeah, it depends where you're at and what you want out of life. If you absolutely want to prioritize, a simpler life where you can enjoy the recreations of life and develop a family and stuff like that, that's not a bad route. That's a good life. It's a good life. I understand some people have ambitions. Sometimes we are clouded by our own ambitions. Sometimes our ambitions are no good for us too. Let's just be honest. It can be a toxic thing for you if you are not treating that with the amount of respect that it truly deserves. The hustle mentality, it's not for everybody, it's really toxic for a lot of people. It was toxic for me too. It gets you into a spiral of feeling like a failure if you're not doing certain things every day, so you have to figure out why you're doing what you're doing first, and then deciding what you're willing to give up in order to achieve certain goals. Because if you want to create music, or you want to create something that you feel is your legacy, that's gonna devote a lot. It's a lot. And the music industry is not an easy thing to make yourself out of. You have to really consider that if you want to make something serious that people recognize, there are people that go their entire lives and don't get married doing the music industry, because that's how much they really want to devote their time to the music industry. So guess what? That's your competition.
There's always somebody working harder, man. There's always
somebody working harder, man. You have to really be real with yourself. You got to say, hey, man, this guy, why are you going to try and compete yourself as the best guitar player in the world? It's like that. I mean, go ahead, but man, good luck. It's gonna be a rough road, because
that's a very dangerous trap to get caught up in as well. I mean, you do need to put in the effort, but any one of you listening to this right now can say, Jason, you got to check out this guitar player. I just heard the best in the world. And I'll say, give me just about 10 seconds and I'll scroll down and find a 11-year-old girl on the other side of the world that blows that person away. And then the same with that person. And it's a downward spiral. And it's not to say you shouldn't practice to get good, put in the time, but kind of going off on a different little tangent here, but what you should practice most is being authentic.
Yes.
Because the last thing we need is another guitar player that can ultra shred just like the other shredder guitar player you just heard. And then we've got just more of the same. Be authentic, come up with your own stuff, shred. I love to shred. You guys know that, but be authentic, be original. Don't try to be like someone else. Or I would even go as far as say, don't try to outdo someone else, because music is extremely subjective. You may be able to shred up and down the neck, but the producer in the other room that's looking at you may choose the guitar player that has more of the feeling solos over you, because that solo might resonate with that song or that audience better, right? So I'm not saying that is always the truth, but just know that I don't feel like music is a competition at all. I don't really get too impressed with people that can do fancy stuff on guitar or anything really. I'm more impressed with the song. Does that song resonate with you? You can put the best vocalist in the world, whoever that may be. Again, very subjective, right? Best drummer, best guitar player, best everything. But if they can't make beautiful music together, then it's just It's just, hey, look what I can do. I used to give that analogy. Stuart Mad TV, nobody's paying attention to him, so he would like fall down or whatever, and look what I can do, And that's why I feel like sometimes I feel like everybody's putting this stuff out there, and it's just like, look what I can do. And
And
I don't know.
if people are struggling with how to create their own sound, that's what Metal Mastermind is here
That's
for.
why we're here, man.
That's why we created what we did, because we were frustrated
Yeah.
with what people were doing. It honestly was it's a retaliation method, to be honest, right? We
It
saw
really
a
is.
lot of crap in the industry. We're like, we could do something about this. And
Yeah.
that's why we still do what we do, because we believe in that mission of providing better music for the world. So, utilize it. It's a resource for you. That's why we're here. If you're listening to this podcast up until this point, it's because you're serious about this stuff. So utilize the tools that we're giving you. Go to metalmastermind.com and find the one that fits your need. There's everything from guitar to theory to studio design to vocals to mixing. We got a whole bunch of stuff. And that's going to help you move the needle forward. So if you're stuck and you don't know exactly how you can improve, I urge you just to do a little bit of research into what we're doing. And I think you'll find they're very genuine ways on how to improve what you have going on, and not to change what you're doing, but to improve what you're doing.
Yeah, our job is really simple. It's to help you create your own sound and help you further develop that own sound. And just you've got the creativity in you. Just the fact that you're listening to this podcast, the fact that you play an instrument or sing or write music or produce or mix or any of that, you've got the talent within you. All we do at Metal Mastermind is we keep feeding that talent and let it grow, allow that to grow. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. We enjoyed having you. Again, head over to metalmastermind.com, check out the courses, all the good stuff we have for you. And hey, do us a favor and share this episode. If this episode helped you, please share it. Make sure you're subscribed to our podcast on whatever platform you're on. And we do this every week, every Tuesday morning. So guys, as always, create your own sound.